Hello, welcome back. If you are new here, hello. My name's Kara, and this is a channel that I use to document a 1 year long low buy project because that helps me keep a tight budget and that helps me to pay off my student loans. Because me, like thousands and thousands and thousands of people, I have some student loans that I need to pay back, and it's challenging, but I am making pretty darn good progress. My goal every month is to use 75% of my net income to pay off my student loans. And I have learned in this year so far, six some months of sharing my progress, that is it's challenging, but it is not impossible. I did it once, and I hope that I can do it a few more times in this year. I'm usually in the high 60s, 67, 68% of my net income used to pay off debt. So I'm doing great, but I don't quite hit my goal all the time. In June, I did some evaluating how I managed my low buy and sort of what rules I gave myself, and I'm hoping in July to see that creates an improvement because I think it would be badass if I could use 75% of my income towards my debt, and yeah, like on paper every month the numbers work, and it's really just a matter of the discipline to follow through. So we'll see. Anyway, the topic today is actually about the way I eat, and I have been following a carnivore diet for close to, well, for 2 years. It's kind of a weird landmark because in June of 2012, I started. And I had been aiming at starting in August because that's when my birthday is. And I thought, okay, August will be a great time. I'll just start when I turn 36 and that'll be a really easy date to remember. But I was so excited because of everything that I had been learning about the carnivore diet that in June, I just couldn't really help myself and I quit buying any plant foods. So in June, I was eating my last salad and I was eating the last of any like paleo sort of foods that I had around because I had been eating a paleo diet for quite a while. And so by July, I was out of those things and I was mostly, I was eating. Like, let's just be clear. In July of 2018, I was eating meat and eggs and full fat dairy and butter all the time. That was it. I've always drank coffee. Like, let's just try to be really clear because people are so both curious and there's a strange sort of nitpicking that goes on around how you eat and all of that. And I just, like, I want to be clear and honest, but I don't care to get sucked into any kind of arguments. So anyway, in June of 2018, I let myself run out of all kinds of plant foods, except for, except for coffee. I have been a coffee drinker all my life, and I continued to drink coffee daily, quite a bit, usually 4 or more cups. I drink basically a pot of coffee every day, whether I make it for myself alone or I make it for myself and a housemate. I drink quite a bit of coffee, and I will admit that I'm addicted to it and I have a dependency. And there have been times like in March of 2019 and in November and December of 2019, I did not drink any coffee. And in both of those experiments, both for 30 days and for 60 days, I was uncomfortable. I was just very tired and I don't know, like my temper flared easily. I was an addict I was an addict without my fix, and I can admit that. So I do drink coffee every single day. And then I also only eat meat and eggs and full-fat dairy. Trying to think of anything else that would be... And by meat, let's clarify also. Meat, I eat beef and pork and chicken and fish, shellfish, any animal, I'm willing to eat. and like, none of those foods are strange to me. I grew up in a family where hunting and fishing was a norm. And so none of those foods are strange to me. And I also have lived on the west coast of the United States in both California and Washington. And there I got to eat fresh shellfish fairly often and absolutely love it. So animal foods are part of my diet. I eat here now in this like sort of chapter of my life in Idaho. I'm eating mostly beef. I eat some pork. I eat some chicken. I eat some fish. I will admit that I have, in fact, done some house sitting and been paid in kokanee salmon, and that was just fine with me. So that's life in Idaho. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I'm trying to kind of think while I'm speaking. I'm pretty sure that's what I've eaten for 2 years now. And I feel the best I've ever felt in my life. But this video specifically, I wanted to talk about some things that I've learned recently that are like correctives. I've been wrong, or at least incomplete. Correctives or further and deeper information that I ever had before. And I'm psyched when I have experiences like this. So I wanted to share, and I had been saying 2 in the last couple of videos. I'd been saying that there were 2 things that I had learned, but I want to actually say there are 3. 3 new to me pieces of information, and I will be listing names and hopefully links, although I am technologically not skilled. Like, that's fine. I'm okay with it. You have to deal with it. But I will certainly share names, and I will share links as best I can to following up on this information. So anyway, the new information that I've come across that affects the way I think about food. And the first one is the work of Dr. Bill Schindler. And he is so interesting and great. And actually the coolest thing about all of this is that none of the people I want to introduce you today, none of these people are strict carnivores. They certainly appreciate the value of animal-based foods, but none of them are strict carnivores. And so, like, I myself enjoy being a carnivore, and I plan to continue being a carnivore, but I don't think you could really accuse me of being extreme about it. Anyway, so Dr. Bill Schindler does a lot of research in evolutionary biology and the development of humans as a species, and his work, I mean, I'm broadly categorizing, and he probably has many specialties within this, but he's done a lot of work on how humans figured out how to cook, how humans figured out tool making, and how so many different groups of humans all over the globe maximized the nutrients that were available to them in both animals and plants. And that's really cool. And this was the researcher I mentioned that influences my thoughts. If I were to ever be an omnivore again, if I were to ever go back to eating plant-based foods in mixture with animal-based foods, I would follow a lot of what I've learned from him, because he noticed that, and he's not the first person to notice this, but he noticed that, say, like, grain-based foods are really hard on human digestion. many people have noticed this. Gluten and lectins are part of seeds, and all grains are seeds. So like grain-based foods are tough on human digestion because of things like the gluten in them, things like the lectins in them, and specific kinds of grains have other or different combinations of anti-nutrients like these that make it hard to digest. Okay. So he has noticed that humans figured out you should soak grains and let them sprout, whereas in an animal like a duck or a goose, those are animals that have a crop, which is like part of their digestive system. It's a small organ. If you've ever hunted goose or duck, and then, you know, when you gut them and you pull out the insides of that animal, sorry, PETA, you'll see that they have these different organs that they have a crop in their body, and that exists to hold the grain for a period of time in a moist environment, and the grain sprouts, and then the duck or goose or whatever actually swallows and digests that grain. And so nothing in nature actually eats raw grain. And humans, many traditional cultures, figured out that if they wanted to eat grain, the best way to do it was to soak it overnight or however long it took so that the grain sprouted, and then if they cooked with it or ground it into flour, it was much easier for humans to digest and get nutrition out of. Anyway, his work is great. His work is great, and he would be more eloquent at describing it. But I know that if I were to go back to eating any kind of plant food, I would look at what he has researched about it and follow those kinds of traditional methods that he has either uncovered or at least validated. You know, because there's lots of traditional methods that, like, you know, my grandmother and my mother both can, and they know about fermenting. Oh, hi. Did you want some attention? This is Chase. I'm helping my sister right now because she and her family are out camping, and I'm taking care of their dog. Oh, yes, I know you love me. This is Chase, who is my one true doggy love. And I think we're going to have to go play outside for a minute, and you will have to wait. Okay, so Chase and I went and sat out in the sun for a little while, and he's now napping. I'm not quite sure where, but yeah. So I was talking about Dr. Bill Schindler's work, and I will provide his name and a link to some of his work, or at least a podcast with him to get you started learning about what he's uncovered about human nutrition and food preparation methods that, you know, some people get into carnivore because they're worried about the anti-nutrients in plant foods. And once I learned about them, yeah, I was worried about the anti-nutrients in plant foods. But he has gathered a lot of traditional wisdom and raised it up from those sources so that you can find out there are so many different ways that people have discovered to mitigate the problematic aspects of plant foods. So that's exciting. If you want to be an omnivore, there are ways to make sure that you're getting the most out of plants and getting the least amount of their harmful and protective substances, which is just awesome. So anyway, Dr. Bill Schindler. Then there are two other things that I've been learning about lately that help me and might help you in thinking about what you eat. And I'm not quite sure what order to put these in because they're really closely related. And I guess we'll just start with one. I guess we'll just get going. So one thing that I've learned recently, and this is within April, May, June. Now it's July. This is new to me and wasn't part of my decision to become carnivore, but I'm really happy that a carnivore diet avoids this dietary pitfall, which is industrial processed seed oils. And many of them just get called vegetable oil. You might have some in your kitchen right now. And so vegetable oil sounds so benign. It sounds so safe. But like what vegetable do you squeeze to get oil? I've never squeezed spinach and gotten oil. I've never squeezed like an eggplant and gotten oil. So vegetable oil is a marketing term, one. And then what most of these oils are is seed oils. They come from seeds, and you'll recognize them here in a minute. They come from seeds, and they're super highly processed. Canola oil, grapeseed oil, soybean oil, corn oil, cottonseed oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil. They are oils extracted from the seeds of a variety of plants. And it's really interesting to me that like they get bottled and marketed and they're in the food section of a store when like the seed that they come from isn't necessarily human food. Like cottonseed oil. I don't know about you, but I've never wanted to eat cotton. I've certainly enjoyed the use of cotton, but I have never wanted to eat it. And canola oil is the seed of a flower called rapeseed, or the seed is called rapeseed. There's a flower associated with it. And like, it's a seed of a plant that we don't eat. Why are we squeezing the seeds and extracting oil and then saying that that's a great food product? I think the two exceptions to this that I want to learn more about, I don't know for sure. I don't know definitively. And so I would like to learn more because that's always a good thing. Olive oil and avocado oil are oils that come from squeezing a fruit. And what I've learned about plant foods in general is that fruits are generally safe because the plant wants you to actually eat fruit. And so if there's an oil from squeezing a fruit, that seems like it would have fewer problems than squeezing the seeds itself, which a plant never wants you to be able to destroy and digest its seeds. A plant wants those seeds to survive, to get into the ground, to sprout, and to become the next generation of that plant. So I have questions that I need to follow up and learn more about olive oil and avocado oil because they're actually from a pressed fruit, but all of the other oils that you'll find in the grocery store. And I work at the grocery store and I can kind of picture the shelf and I know that there's, peanut oil, walnut oil, safflower oil, canola oil, sunflower seed oil, soybean oil. They are all from seeds of plants that we don't normally even eat. And they're the seeds, not fruit. They're the seeds. And what it sounds like it takes to make a seed oil is a pretty serious processing and refinement that just not terribly natural. So anyway, the experts that I would point you towards to learn more about seed oils would be Dr. Chris Knobbe or Knobbe or Knobbe. I've heard his name said a few different ways. It's Knobbe, and I'll have his name at least spelled correctly down below, if not also a link to an interview with him or something to get you started. He is a doctor. He's a ophthalmologist, not sure. Doctor of the eyes of one kind or the other. And he ended up researching the effect that seed oils have had on humans over the generations where we've had seed oils in our diet because of the way that it has affected and unfortunately increased the incidence of age-related macular degeneration. It's interesting to me that like he's an eye doctor and he was noticing problems with eyes that you couldn't find back in history of his profession. You know, there have always been people who cared about vision and they weren't reporting problems like macular degeneration very often until the 20th century. Similarly, dentists, there have always been people who have looked after teeth, and in a similar way, dentists didn't have a history of serious dental problems until the 20th century. And you have somebody like Dr. Weston A. Price in the 20s and 30s saying, wait a second, I was never taught about all these problems that I see that are common. What changed so that all of a sudden my patients have these huge problems that I was never even taught about? Well, what had changed was that food was becoming industrialized where he lived. And Dr. Weston A. Price is amazing. He actually decided and noticed that there was nobody in the United States to study as a control group because everybody in the United States was eating a westernized processed food diet, even by the 20s and 30s. So he traveled the world and went looking for groups of people that hadn't been introduced to westernized food yet. And he found lots of examples. And he noted that everybody, whether they were eating carbohydrates, whether they were eating fat, protein, whatever the ratio in their diet, as long as they were eating a traditional diet, they had really exceptionally great health. And that wherever that group of people was, those members of their community who were exposed to a Western diet, like you could have the inland Eskimo people that were still eating a traditional diet, and you could have the Eskimo people on the coast who encountered explorers and Westerners and started trading for things like flour and sugar and oil. The group exposed to Western food was having the same dental degeneration, which is what he noticed the most. They would have the most degeneration physically from those Western foods, while the people who hadn't been exposed to that kind of food yet were still doing great. So it's interesting that like those very basic things, like the health of your eyes, the health of your teeth, I wonder what else there could have been a study of 100 years ago where these things would have been really noticed. And now we just think it's kind of the norm to be unhealthy in certain ways. But 100 years ago, the doctors were like, wait a second, like nobody showed me or talked to me that kids' teeth would just be falling out. What's going on? I wonder how many health issues we take for granted that should be raising giant red flags. Anyway, so this Dr. Chris Knobbe or Knobbe or whatever, however you say his name, he is an eye doctor and has done extensive research on seed oils and the effect that they have on humans. And he does a great job. I'm going to try to share the link to a conversation that he has where he shares the history of when seed oil foods were introduced into the human diet and the measurable effects of that. So his interviews are more of a history lesson. And then I want to share another resource, a doctor named Cate Shanahan, who has done a lot of work also on traditional foods and different ways of eating. And an interview that she had with Dr. Paul Saladino, who is a carnivore enthusiast. He calls himself the Carnivore MD. But he has a conversation with Dr. Cate Shanahan that is more of a organic chemistry deep dive into what's happening when you ingest seed oils and what's happening and why they sort of denature and derange your metabolism. So anyway, those are two great resources. Dr. Chris Knobbe, and Dr. Cate Shanahan, their work on why you should really, at all costs, avoid eating seed oils. And that's something that I'm happy a carnivore diet has me easily already avoiding, but if I were to go back to being an omnivore, seed oils are something that I would still definitely avoid. They are, for all intents and purposes, it seems like they are poisonous. Okay. Another researcher who does a great job of bringing up kind of new information or kind of connecting more of the dots of why eating animal-based foods is a great idea and why avoiding seed oils is important is a doctor named Nadir Ali. And he's given lots of different talks, but more than avoiding seed oils or how you process plant-based foods that you want to eat, he does a great job of describing why cholesterol is important and why having higher LDL isn't something to worry about very much. And he's not the first. He's certainly not even the first that I've encountered. There's Dave Feldman, there's like Ivor Cummings, and there's a lot of people who have reassured me at least, and hopefully others, that cholesterol is not really the problem that we've been told that it is. But he goes similarly to how Cate Shanahan talks about the deeper organic chemistry of why seed oils create damaging cascades through your metabolism. He talks about how cholesterol is so important, and the source of cholesterol is very, very important, and that humans really need animal-based foods and animal cholesterol. And I mean, only animals have cholesterol. And that when we eat plants, and this kind of ties together with the seed oil issue, when we eat fats from plants, we're not getting cholesterol, we're getting phytosterols, which is the kind of cholesterol that plants use. And phytosterols are not used the same way in our bodies and can derange us in a variety of ways. So I really recommend their work to you. And now, to set aside the researchers and to just say what I think and what I wonder about. And it's mostly what I wonder because I'm not trained as a scientist or a nutritionist. I wonder if almost like the animal or not the animal kingdoms, there's just one animal kingdom, but the kingdoms of life in the world, and there are 5, and I'm not even going to remember what they all are, but I know there are animals and there are plants and there are fungi, and so then I think there's like protozoa and bacteria. I might have that wrong, but in those 5 kingdoms, it's almost like 5 different kinds of operating software for life. This is definitely speculation and a metaphor that might not really work out overall. But I wonder, there are these maybe 5 operating systems, and that in order to have healthy cell structure, you kind of need to make sure you're getting the kind of software you need in your food. Like, there are lots of different animals that can eat plants, and humans can eat plants, no question. But we can't get everything we need from them. And we can also end up getting things that mess us up. There are animals that are very suited to eating plants, like ruminant animals, and they're able to somehow make the conversion where they eat plants and tons of fibrous roughage kind of stuff, but because they have, count them 4 stomachs, they have the capacity to process all of that all the way into a form that is animal, let's say, software. And humans, we have less of the processing hardware. We don't have 4 stomachs, we just have the 1. And so it's important for us to make sure we ingest animal necessary nutrients from an animal source, because otherwise we won't be able to extract them. It's just kind of a metaphor that runs in my imagination. I don't know if that's a good way to put things. So there's that. You need to make sure that you get everything that your software and your hardware needs. And it seems like we need to eat a significant amount of food from the animal kingdom, and some plants work out if we mitigate the anti-nutrients. But we definitely can't depend solely on the plant, fungi, other kingdoms for all of the things that we need. That just seems to be the case. So anyway, those were three researchers, three interrelated topics, both how we need to process plant foods if we're going to eat them from Dr. Bill Schindler, the absolute danger and travesty of seed oils in our diet, Drs. Chris Knobbe and Cate Shanahan, and then a little more of the biochemistry around seed oils, but also plant sterols and how humans really do need certain things from the animal kingdom in their diet. Dr. Nadir Ali, and I'll have at least their names spelled correctly so you can Google them, and I'm hoping to have a good conversation link to each of them down in the description. But those are some things that I've been thinking about lately and learning that inform how I will either continue being a carnivore. That's my plan right now. But if I were to introduce any kind of plant foods into my diet, I would be taking these things into consideration. And if you eat an omnivore diet right now, both plant and animal, you might want to know about seed oils and other ways to prepare plant foods that will get the most out of them for you and avoid the most detrimental elements of those. So there we are, and I might go see what Chase the puppy is up to and go play with him a little bit more. I'll see you in a week.